Supershoe for the elites or Supershoe for the everyman? Which one is for you? Today we're discussing the Cloudboom Max versus the Cloudboom Strike. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Today we're comparing two of On's premier racing options, the Cloudboom Strike versus the Cloudboom Max. And if it's your first time watching one of my videos, you may notice some timestamps below in the description. Please feel free to jump around to the various parts of this comparison, but if you do so, I'd sure appreciate if you come back, watch the full thing when you get a sec, so I put a lot of time and effort into these videos. And if you've been a viewer for a while but haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please consider doing so today and turning on those notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video, which is typically Monday through Friday. Now, quick plug before I get into this comparison, I am actively raising funds for the Tokyo Marathon in 2026 through the Sports Legacy Foundation. If you'd like to help me raise those dollars, raise those funds, please consider donating through the GoFundMe link in the description below. Or if you're in need of any running fuel or running gear, any of the commissions generated from those sales are actually going towards the charity as well. So if you'd like to buy some running gels, electrolytes, post-run workout drinks, or anything like that, please consider using the link to Fuel Goods. Or if you're looking at those Wallaco half tights and you're curious about grabbing a pair and want 20% off and want to help charity, please consider using the affiliate link below as well as the code RADDAD20 at checkout. Now, quick disclaimers and disclosures are that I did receive both these shoes for free for the purpose of review from On. That being said, I'm not paid, I'm not given talk tracks, talking points, not obligated to include them in any specific content, and all thoughts are entirely my own. With that out of the way, let's talk about the intended use of the shoes. Now, both of these are technically racing shoes. However, the distinction that On makes is that the Cloudboom Max is for the 4+ hour marathoner, basically like the runner who is just looking to finish and have a good time, while the Cloudboom Strike is going to be kind of their premier option, dedicated more towards those who are trying to PR, who are going for a lot of the times kind of that 3 or below marathon pace. That being said, that's how we're going to discuss them today. From a price standpoint, the Cloudboom Max comes in at $230. Meanwhile, the Cloudboom Strike comes in at a whopping $280. Frankly, the Cloudboom Max is probably a little bit expensive for its category because it probably fits best with super trainers. That being said, if you're using it as a dedicated race shoe, then that is within the ballpark, because $280, to be honest, is not that expensive anymore for a race shoe. Not saying it's not expensive, I'm saying compared though to the market, that's where the premium race shoes are all sitting, is in that $275 to $300 range, unfortunately. Now, from a specs perspective, the shoes are fairly different. So the Cloudboom Max comes in at 10.4 ounces, which is 296 grams. Meanwhile, the Cloudboom Strike is 7.5 ounces, which is 212 grams. So it is basically 3 whole ounces lighter on foot. The other thing is, from a stack standpoint, the Max comes in at 40 in the heel, 32 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop, and the Strike comes in at actually 43 in the heel, 39 in the forefoot for a 4mm drop. So lower drop overall, and just because of how they measure the shoe, right, where they measure from, you actually technically have 43 in this one, while you have 40 in this one. Now, that may confuse you, but that's usually because the sidewalls actually come up higher than where you actually sit in the shoe. Now, the fit on these two shoes is pretty different. The Cloudboom Max is actively wide throughout. And I would say it fits true to size though, so I would go with your normal size, but if you're narrow-footed, I don't believe that this shoe is gonna work for you. It is a little bit baggy, not so much that you can't get locked down though. And then the Cloudboom Strike for me was actually really narrow. You know, I felt like it had a standard toe box. I felt like the length was probably just about right, true to size lengthwise, but I felt like the midfoot area as well as even the heel were actively narrow or snug. For me, the shoe as a whole felt low volume, while the Cloudboom Max, I would say, is high volume. Now, from an upper perspective, the Max has a breathable mesh, which is polyester with TPU overlays. It also has a gusseted tongue that is kind of that thin, almost like felt-ish material, and then you have some light cushion there in the heel. Overall, it's a much more traditional fit. I would say it's comfortable. I didn't really have any rubbing, any hot spots. It was very, very breathable. And despite being, you know, actively wide, I didn't need to use a runner's knot to feel locked into the shoe. Keep in mind though that the shoe is built to be run at kind of that, I'm not going to do the math right, but let's call it like an 8:30 pace or slower. And if that's the case, you know, at those paces, I was not shifting around in the shoe at all. But when I did pick up strides and I was running, you know, sub 6 minute pace, that's where I did feel a little bit of shifting in the shoe. But within its intended use, I had no issues whatsoever, and the shoe was just very comfortable with the upper. Now with the Cloudboom Strike, it's a one-piece transparent mesh. So you can actually see through the shoe there, and then you have some of these panelings, different things within the shoe that are gonna give it a little bit more structure, a little bit of support. You're not gonna get really much cushion at all. And same thing, the tongue on this shoe is a little bit short, but again, so long as you're not doing a runner's knot, you should be fine. The tongue itself is not gusseted, which is interesting, but it is stitched into the shoe, which I do believe contributes to kind of the snug feel in the midfoot for me, where you can't really adjust the tongue, it just sits there, so the shoe can be a little bit difficult to get on and off. The other thing is that you have just not really a whole lot of cushion there in the heel. You can see you just have like those two spots right there. Some people have had bloody heel issues with this shoe. For me, it worked out really, really well, but I would consider potentially using some blister resist socks or something along those lines in that heel area if you are prone to any cutting or like rubbing and blistering in the heel area. I did have a little bit of irritation with this shoe in the upper though. For me, that happened more so in the toe box on the tops of my toes a little bit. And so that's where I say like the shoe feels very, very low volume. There's a couple of unique aspects of it that might be contributing to that though. So moving on to the midsole, starting with the Cloudboom Strike, you actually have a drop in midsole, which is fairly unique. So I'm gonna take this out of the shoe really quick. So this is the drop in midsole. So you can see this actually goes inside of the shoe. And that's one of the reasons why the shoe looks a little bit less stack than I kind of claimed it was. Part of that's because, well, the stack's right here. A lot of it just sits in the shoe itself. And to me, that's what contributed to some of the low volume feel of the shoe, because even if it looks plenty roomy, well, this is actually in there filling up some of that space. What's kind of interesting though is the carbon fiber plate is stitched onto that bottom layer of foam. So the foam itself is very responsive. This piece right here is fairly soft, fairly bouncy. Now they're utilizing Helion HF, which is their PIBA based version. And I believe the entirety of this shoe is all Helion HF PIBA based. Right. Now the shoe itself is snappy, it's bouncy, it's responsive. I felt like it was one of the faster, aggressive feeling shoes on the market when it came to super shoes. And I do think it still is comfortable, but it does feel a little bit awkward for me underfoot, almost like you're bouncing on like a board or something inside there, right? So it doesn't feel quite as natural underfoot as a couple of other shoes. So for me, I really like this shoe more for speed work. I really like it for shorter, faster stuff, but not necessarily for longer races like a half marathon to marathon. I think I could probably tolerate it for a half marathon, but for a marathon, I might struggle in it. The other thing I would say is I don't feel like this shoe is very stable at all, because you do kind of feel like you're always running on a rounded surface. So I did find like that my ankles felt a little bit fatigued in the shoe. Now, the Cloudboom Max is a different experience entirely. So you have the TPE, or you have the PIBA based Helion HF up top, you have the TPE based Helion HF on bottom. That bottom layer is very firm, and you can squeeze it in hand and it feels really, really firm. And then you actually have a nylon plate with fiberglass infused into it. Only about 8% of it is fiberglass, but the plate is shaped very interesting to where it's a normal plate, but then in the heel, instead of just a continuation of the plate, you actually have a hole. So your heel actually drops into the hole, and then it kind of, gives you the extra spring as you toe off, right? So it's not gonna feel as rigid, it's not gonna feel as snappy or aggressive either. The shoe was designed to be able to kind of be smooth and be comfortable underfoot for longer periods of time. So it's not gonna be quite as harsh. And I did find that to be the case. The other thing I would say is the shoe is very, very stable. The cutout works really, really well. And so it does keep you guided on the ground. And overall, it's just a nice and comfortable experience. Now, the shoe is not even close to as fast as the Cloudboom Strike, right? It's not a comparison. The Cloudboom Strike blows it out of the water in terms of speed, but the Cloudboom Strike really only likes to go fast and is not very pace versatile in my experience of a super shoe, right? While the Cloudboom Max, I think a lot of people, like even faster than 4-hour racers, could wear the shoe, could enjoy the shoe, could even race in the shoe, depending on what they're looking for. So I do think it does a really good job when it comes to the midsole. Now, from an outsole perspective, I believe both of them are using that computer optimized pattern and the same rubber compound. I found that the grip was pretty good overall on both of the shoes. You know, with the Cloudboom Strike, I wore them in the snow and I did slip a little in the snow, but honestly, there was enough snow I probably would have like slipped with any shoe. So for the most part, I think it does an excellent job. I think both of them are going to be great. You do get a little bit more rubber compound on the Cloudboom Max. You know, again, you just need a little bit more thickness because it's supposed to be a little bit more durable long term. So now as far as my pick between the two, you know, it's really not fair because to me, I do feel like the Cloudboom Max is a really good training companion to the Cloudboom Strike. For me personally, if I was going to risk it for the biscuit and go for a PR in a marathon, I would choose the Cloudboom Strike. I think that it's going to be the faster, more aggressive, but also the riskier shoe to play with. But I do think it's a really, really solid racing option. But I really like the Cloudboom Max. Like, I really, really have been enjoying it. I've done some long run workouts in it. I haven't done any shorter, faster sessions. I've done strides in it, and I just didn't feel like it was best for that. So I guess, like, in terms of variety of speed, I do think that the Cloudboom Strike is a little bit more versatile in that sense. But I still think that if I had to choose one versus the other, depending on the workout, like for speed work, for racing, I would go the Strike. For tempos, you know, even easy miles, not that I recommend a super trainer type shoe for easy miles, but like the Cloudboom Max is going to be more pace versatile. So really it'll just come down to what are you trying to use it for? Where is it going to sit in your rotation? Is it your dedicated race shoe? In which case, yeah, go with whichever one is more dedicated to the pace that you're trying to hit. So just some final thoughts. You know, I feel like On gets a lot of heat every time I post about them. I get a review or a short. I just feel like there's always at least one person in the comments who has to comment something like, oh, On is terrible. And I feel like On maybe a couple of years ago, I would concur with that. I don't believe that, you know, there are many bad shoes out there. At the end of the day, someone's always going to like the shoe, right? And so it's hard for me to say this is bad when there's someone where it's their favorite shoe, right? But I will say that I think a couple of years ago, most runners weren't huge fans of On, and I think they built in their mind like this they've solidified where On sits in their perception of running shoes. And as a shoe reviewer who tries to review everything, tries to get, you know, my feet into every type of shoe that there is to test, and I try and go in, you know, purely objective and just, I guess it's subjective, but without any opinion in mind when I go and test a shoe, I have been very pleasantly surprised, and I've enjoyed pretty much all of my miles in On, right? The last shoe that I wore from On that I just wasn't a huge fan of, frankly, Cloudsurfer Next, I just felt like it was a little too firm without enough pop, but some people like the shoe. And then the Cloudmonster 2 was just way too wide for me. It just didn't work for my feet. But everything I've tried since those shoes has been really, really nice, and I've enjoyed it. So I think that On is doing some good things. I think they're heading in the right direction. I do think that they price aggressively, and I'm not a huge fan of that, but I like that. I like the progress that the brand has made over the last few years. So because of that, I'm going to say that I do like both of these shoes. I've genuinely enjoyed miles in both of these shoes. In fact, picking these back up makes me want to take them back out on the track. So anyway, if you watched this far, I sure appreciate you. Let me know in the comments what you enjoyed, what questions you have, what other comparisons you'd like to see. On top of that, if you've watched this far and you haven't hit the subscribe button, please consider doing so today. And again, quick plug, if you'd like to help me raise money for the Tokyo Marathon, please consider using the GoFundMe link in the description below, or any of the affiliate links, as the commissions are going towards charity. Now, lastly, we're going to finish with a question, which is, what do you prefer to race in? A super shoe or a super trainer? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.